All right, gentlemen, good to see you this morning. Good to have some folks here in the room with us who had nowhere else to go today. And so holiday hasn't quite started yet, so it's good to have you with us. We're just going to do a little something today. Phil is going to be back with you next week. But this week, Matt is preaching on Sunday and was going to do 4 different scriptures, one of which was Revelation. And while I love Revelation, I decided it might be something to do a little lighthearted today, since it's a holiday and we were kind of going into holiday mood. And so I began to think about this time of year, I usually start getting questions from folks who have experienced our little learning instrument we're going to use today before, and they want a copy of it, or they remember it and think about it. So I thought, why not? We'll go ahead and do it. Some of you may have been through this before at some point in time, but it's a good refresher for you for coming up for the holy season with this. So we're going to do a little bit of a Christmas test today. We will send out electronically the questions and answers to this based on my reading of the scriptures. Back in the early 80s, I was at West End United Methodist Church, was in youth ministry there. And that's when I still slept on the floor and thought that was fun. But now that's not quite as much fun. So I'm not youthful in the same kind of ways I used to be with that. So anyway, I began to look at the Christmas season, and our youth group at West End thought, wouldn't it be interesting to look at all the things that the church does during the Christmas season, Advent and Christmas, and what it meant from a theological standpoint, but also from a biblical understanding, and to look at the hymns that we sing and what is the message that we find there. What is the pageantry and the traditions that we do in the church? And then also, what does the Bible say actually about the birth narrative? And so today we're going to spend some time looking at this birth narrative, and then we'll have a chance to give some conversation related to that. So anyway, if we'll go on to the first slide, where I'm going to just walk through these. And if you have a question you want to ask along the way, that would be fine. But we're going to go through these, and then I've got a chance for a little Q&A at the end of it too with that. So the very first question here is, as long as Christmas has been celebrated, it has been on December the 25th. True or false? False. How do you know that? Did you just guess? 50-50 chance. I'll say false. Yes, sir, Mr. Andy. Early Christians did not celebrate Christmas in the way that we do it now, is one of the answers. And so it was not until the early 1100s that Christmas began to be celebrated in the way that moved us to where we are today. That is true. Actually, Pope Julius I helped finally pull it all together, because all the faith communities were beginning to celebrate Christmas at whatever time was comfortable to them, and whatever the tradition was of their specific community. And so ultimately, Pope Julius I decided that we needed to come up with a date, and related to looking at the festivals and the things that were going on, as well as trying to give some scholarly content to it, they finally came up with December the 25th. And interestingly, obviously, even today is not celebrated on December the 25th around the world. Any ideas of where some places might be that would celebrate it other than December the 25th? Russia. You know, interestingly, where the Orthodox Church is where they do it at a different time. And they usually do it as far as January the 6th or 7th, which is at the end for us of the 12 days of Christmas that begins on December the 25th. It is the beginning of Epiphany, and it's the celebration of the coming of the wise men. And so for that reason, that's when they do it. And so even today around the world. But interestingly, here in the United States in 1870, Christmas was on June the 26th. The country was coming out of the Civil War. There was a desire to do something that would be festive, something that would help the country. And for some reason, during that time frame, it was actually in 1870, it was on June the 26th. So it's not always been December the 25th as such. And December the 25th was a date that was chosen based on scholarly assumptions, but also trying to be in tune with a time in which we could be preparing ourselves for the winter months and for what was ahead with that. So the second question then is, Joseph was from A, Bethlehem, B, Jerusalem, C, Nazareth, D, Egypt, E, Minnesota. Remember, this is back when I was in youth ministry. F, none of the above. So Joseph was from where? Bethlehem originally. And so in the second chapter of Luke, the third and fourth verses, it said all went to their own towns to be registered. Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth to Galilee in Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and the family of David. So that is A. Then moving on to the next one is, how did Mary and Joseph travel to Bethlehem? Camel, donkey, walked, Volkswagen. Joseph walked, Mary rode a donkey, or who knows?
Gonna go with E.
Actually, it is F. The Bible doesn't say. Now, interestingly, if you'll look at the next slide, this is the way most people envision it. That first of all, of course, Mary is pregnant by our tradition. And so she would have ridden the donkey and Joseph would have walked. Actually, culturally, it was the other way around. Joseph would have ridden the donkey and Mary would have walked. Now, we often feel very compelled to be sympathetic for Mary and to imagine her being the one riding the donkey, that she was pregnant at the time. But the reality is the Bible doesn't say one way or another. And tradition gives us one vision of what it might be, but we really don't know. There's no declaratory statement in the scriptures about what that would have been. Also, it's interesting to note the transition they would have been making from Nazareth to Bethlehem. So the next slide is a map that we've seen, and hopefully you can see that there in the room here. You can see there's actually two different routes that are potential routes. If they were to go straight from Nazareth to Bethlehem and go through Samaria, it would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 74 miles. If they went the traditional way, because they were Orthodox Jews, they would have avoided Samaria. And so they would have gone down the Jordan River Valley, which would have avoided going through Samaria, because at that point in time, Samaritans and Jews did not get along. And so it was normal for folks to travel north and south by skirting around Samaria. So which way they went, we're not sure. The Bible also doesn't tell us, but we know kind of what tradition is for folks to do that. So let's move on to the next one then. This is Mary and Joseph were married when Mary became pregnant. True or false?
It's false.
It is false. You are correct. In the first chapter of Matthew, the 18th verse, it says, "Now the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place this way. When his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, and before they lived together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit." And this, again, is the story that we remember where the angel came and proclaimed to Mary that she would be the son of the Messiah. And so the Holy Spirit came upon her and she conceived this wonderful gift that the Lord has given to us. Now, in culturally, again, engagement is a little different than our tradition with that. So in most instances, the marriage would have been arranged between Joseph and Mary. Some speculation, again, how well did they really know each other? Nazareth was a small village, somewhere between 12 and 22 families, units, we think, at that point, which meant there was probably 200 or folks so in Nazareth at the time. And so Joseph would have been making arrangements with Mary's dad and mom related to her betrothal to him. And once you became engaged, the engagement had to go for 1 calendar year. And while you began to build relationship during that time, you were not considered married, of course, but either way, it was not normal and it would have not been usual for the engagement to include sexual relations with that. And so for Mary, we know about her. And so Mary and Joseph were not married when Mary became pregnant. Number 5. There we go. Mary and Joseph were married when Jesus was born. True or false? It is false. You are correct. The 2nd chapter of the Gospel of Luke, the 5th verse says, he, Joseph, went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged and who was expecting a child. Then the 6th one is along those same lines. Mary was a virgin when she delivered Jesus.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That one got a yes on that one. That is correct. 1st chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, the 25th verse. But, the other way around. It's, yes. But Joseph had no marital relations with her until she had borne a son, and his name was Jesus. So again, there had been no relations in an immaculate conception that took place from the Holy Spirit coming upon Mary. Then number 7. What did the innkeeper tell Mary and Joseph? There's no room in the inn. I have a stable you can use. Come back after the Christmas rush and I should have some vacancies. Both A and B, or none of the above.
We taught A and B.
E, none of the above. There is no innkeeper in the Bible. That is something that we have done through our pageantry to give a completeness to the story. And so we talk about the fact that there is an innkeeper who says there's no room at the inn. Actually, it is, the Greek word that's used here is kataluma, which means lodging place or guest room. So the word that is used at this point is actually there is no room for them in the guest room. There's no room. They have gotten to be with relatives, and everybody, you remember being registered, everybody's going home to their home place. And so it's like Thanksgiving normally, when you have lots of family descend upon your house and you have people sleeping on the couch, and you may even make a pallet on the floor. You may have folks that go to a hotel or something, but anyway, you have folks who come in and who stay at your house. And so for Mary and Joseph, they have actually come to be with their relatives in Bethlehem as decreed. And so they come and they do that. And anyway, they come to what is the guest room. And I've got a picture here, a drawing of a typical floor plan in a home. with that. And then I'll show you in just a minute another picture with that. But it was normal that the house would be usually 2 levels and sometimes 3, but most of the time a 2-level house, in which that when you entered the inner courtyard or a door from the outside into the house, you would actually come into a courtyard area, or at least an area where family life took place. Sometimes there was a stove. Sometimes they did their cooking outside in the heat of the summer. They would do cooking there, but there was also a place to keep the family animals. And so there was somewhat of a stable, if you want to call it that, inside the house with that. And you can see on this plan, the family room included living space, but it also included sometimes space for the larger animals. And they would intentionally plant the floor so that there would be an opportunity for the animals to be in there, and cleanliness would be an easier thing with that. So the floor plan including something like that. There's been several places, if you go to Israel today, there's several places that have created what would be a typical first century home. And you can see that there's a door to the right in the picture there, and that's the door to the outside. If you go into Jerusalem today, or if you go to other places around Israel, if you go to their house, there's an outer door that creates space for the family and safety and security with that. So there's a door there in some shape, manner, or form. And even if they was not a closed door, there at least was an opening that was there that allowed people to come in and out easily with that. And you can see it goes, and then there's a step down. And with that step down, there's 2 doors to the left. One that goes up a little bit. The other one is underneath the dwelling place there. And one of those places would have been the place that the animals would have been kept with that. So when Mary and Joseph get there, there is no room for them in the second floor, which is where the guest room is, or up on the roof, depending upon the time of year. They used outdoor space a good bit. And during the heat of the summer, you would actually sleep on the roof at night to keep cool. And the breezes would blow, and it would be very, very pleasant for the family most of the time up there. And because of the way the seasons run, with the rainy season and the wet season, there was always a good bit of time in which there was not rain, and it would have been a good place to be. But you can see the steps go upstairs, and that is actually into the guest area. The first floor would have been not only the area in which the animals were kept, but also it would have been the living space for the family with that. So a little different than what we're used to seeing. And of course that varied from place to place. And the more the family had in the way of belongings, and the more that they had in wealth, the number of rooms that were added. And then traditionally you would add as you could for your son or your son's family to live with you in their own space, but be attached. A lot of times too, if there was an additional room added, there would be an outside entrance, either steps going up to the roof or a door in a back place with that. So moving on then to the next one. Jesus was delivered in a stable, a manger, a cave, a barn, or unknown.
Unknown.
It is unknown. There's, again, a lot of things we assume based on tradition. There's no word about it, but it does say afterwards that Jesus is laid in a manger. With that, in the 2nd chapter, the 7th verse of Luke, it says, "And she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth," or our traditional King James Version, swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. And again, the inn being a guest room in most instances. Bethlehem was a small town. It was about 7 miles outside of Jerusalem. And so there would have been hotel type accommodations in Jerusalem, but Bethlehem would not have had your local Motel 6 or something like that. In most instances, you would have stayed with. But again, we live in a culture and a world where hospitality is primary. And so you would have opened your home for any person that was seeking shelter with that. So Jesus was born then, but then the scriptures tell us where he was. One of the things that was listed here too is caves. There are cave homes. In fact, the traditional location for Mary and Joseph's family, in fact, Mary's family in Nazareth is caves. And so there would have been cave that was hewn out of the limestone rock that is there. And it would have created a dwelling place for the family in that. So again, it's a little different. We're not used to cave living too much, but in certain parts of this country, obviously in the Southwest in particular, cave living was pretty much the normal with that. And then the next one is number 9. A manger is a stable for domestic animals, a wooden hay bin, a feeding trough, or a barn. What is a manger?
A wooden hay bin.
A wooden hay bin?
A stone feeding trough.
A stone feeding trough. Actually, I'll take both of those. This is one of those that is dependent upon where you are and what the tradition is. The next picture here is of a typical home. This is obviously a recreation with that. And you can see the feeding trough there in front and center of the picture. And that is very traditional. Wood would have been used some, but wood was not overly available, which is one of the reasons that they used caves a lot. Is because our thinking about putting 2x4s together and then putting sheetrock and all that is not what they had. And you've had the cedars of Lebanon you've heard about, where there was a lot of ornamental wood that was used. And but that was kind of unusual. Wood didn't last very long. And if they had used wood, we wouldn't have the archaeological information we have today about many of the places people lived, the villages that were established, because obviously the rocks are what remains with that. And so you can even go to excavations now, and you can actually see first and pre-first century buildings. When you go to Dan, where we've been up by Caesarea Philippi, you can see a gate that Abraham built, or built at the time of Abraham. And if it would have been wooden, it just would not have lasted that long. So we were fortunate that a lot of things were put together with wood, not wood, but with stone with that. But stone is traditional, but wood is an acceptable answer also when it was available with that. So number 10, which animals does the Bible say were present at Jesus's birth? Cows and sheep and goats, cows, donkeys, and sheep and goats only, miscellaneous barnyard animals, lion, tigers, and elephants, or none of the above?
None of the above.
You're getting the sense that none of the above is the answer to a lot of these with that. But that's true. The Bible doesn't mention what kind of animals were there with them in the end. So the Bible just doesn't say what it is. And again, we, for our pageantry and our tradition, as we will have here, we'll have a camel once again at our living nativity, and we'll have sheep and goats and some other animals that are here. But we know the traditional animals that families use, just like in the farms here in the United States, where chickens and cows and pigs and things like that were normal with that. But we don't know. The Bible just doesn't say on that. Number 11. Who saw the star in the east? Shepherds, Mary and Joseph, 3 kings, both A and C, or none of the above?
C.
D.
It is E.
D.
And it's E because this is somewhat a trick question, and this was probably not a fair one with it. First of all, there are wise men. They're not kings in the Bible. That comes from a traditional hymn that we sing, We Three Kings. And so it denotes their education and their royal status with that, but they actually are wise men in the scriptures. In the second chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, the first and second verses, it says, in the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage. So they, first of all, in the story that we have here in Matthew, we have a question raised by the wise men that are there. Then number 12, how many angels spoke to the shepherds? 1, 3, a multitude, none of the above.
One.
It is one. It is one angel who actually speaks to the shepherds. And this is in the second chapter of the Gospel of Luke, the 9th verse. Then an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. And then the angel goes on to speak with more information with that. Then number 13 here. What sign did the angel, and that's a typo on my part, I had an S on there. What sign did the angel tell the shepherds to look for? This way to baby Jesus, a sign. A star over Bethlehem, a baby that doesn't cry, a house with a Christmas tree, a baby in a stable, or none of the above?
None of the above.
What was that, Johnny?
None of the above. Elf.
It is F. It is none above of the above on that too, because in the Luke 2nd chapter, the 12th verse, this will be a sign for you. You will find a child wrapped in bands of cloth and lying in a manger. And that was their sign. Their sign was to find a baby that was wrapped in swaddling clothes, which every baby was at that point in time. And they were to go, and that would be their sign to do that. Then in 14, what did the angels sing? Now this is where the multitude comes in. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Alleluia. Unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given. Glory to God in the highest, and the rest of that. Glory to the newborn King, my sweet Lord.
D.
It is D. With that, it is in the 2nd chapter of Luke, the 14th verse. Glory to God in the highest of heavens, and on earth peace among those whom he favors, or peace, goodwill among people, depending upon the translation that you have. Then 15. What is a heavenly host? An angel at the gate of heaven, the angel who invites people to heaven, the angel who serves drinks in heaven, an angel choir, or an angel army?
I'm going to go with F, none of the above.
It is actually E. It is an angel army. And a host, by definition, is an army. And that's a historical word that was used, and the word that they used in this instance was there was an angel army present with the one who spoke, and we call that the multitude of angels. Then 16. Yes. That is not in the Bible specifically. This is kind of a misnomer. This is just the definition of what a host was and is at a time. So, Luke 2.
Verse 13, suddenly a great company of the heavenly hosts appeared.
So that technically that's correct. I just didn't put that in there, but by definition, host is an army.
Luke 2, verse 13.
Luke 2, verse 13, Michael is saying at this point. I will add that. Okay. And then this is, there was snow that first Christmas. only in Bethlehem, all over Israel, nowhere in Israel, somewhere in Israel, Mary and Joseph only dreamed of a white Christmas.
We really don't snow.
Yeah.
Now, those of you that have been with me to Israel before ought to know the answer to this one. Somewhere in Israel. Where in Israel was and is there snow?
Mount Hermon.
Northern Israel.
Mount Hermon or Mount Hermon is where there is snow. And the picture that we see next is of Mount Hermon. This is up near Caesarea Philippi. It is 40 miles north of the Sea of Galilee. It is in an area that has gone back and forth from Syrian control. Right now, the peace treaty after the Six-Day War gave this property to be held by the Israelis. So sometimes it's in Syria, sometimes it's in Israel with that. And most of the year, there is snow on Mount Hermon. As you remember, it's the only ski resort in the whole country of Israel with that. And as you can see, this is a picture that I took in late spring. And you can see Mount Hermon in the back, fully with snow with there. Is Mount Hermon or Mount Hermon is Hermon. Sometimes you'll see it AN, but most of the time it's ON with that. And then 17, the baby Jesus cried when the doctor slapped him on his behind, when the little drummer boy started banging on his drum, just like other babies, he never cried.
We don't know.
It's C. The scriptures tell us that Jesus was fully human and fully divine. And so no crying he makes, and away in a manger is where we get that information. It's in the hymn, Away in a Manger, but it's not in the scriptures. As far as we know, in fact, one of the verses we all know is Jesus wept as he overlooked the city of Jerusalem with that. And we knew that Jesus turned the tables over, and he had emotions just like all the rest of us do. But to our knowledge, Jesus was just like every other baby in life. Then 18. What is frankincense? Precious metal, precious fabric, precious perfume, an Easter monster story, or none of the above?
C.
It's perfume. And then
C, a precious perfume.
It is precious perfume. Yes?
I'm going to jump in because I've lived in Yemen. The frankincense is actually the syrup that comes from like a maple tree has sap. So they burn it, they take the sap and burn it as perfume, but it's actually just comfort.
Yeah, and you'll see, I'll show you a picture of frankincense in just a minute.
David, doesn't it come from the bark of a tree?
Comes from the sap.
It comes, well, you're right. They extract it from the tree. Sometimes it's done as we do maple syrup in this country. Other times they do burn it, and it runs off of that when it gets hot with that. And then the next one is 19. What is myrrh? An easily shaped metal, a spice used for burying people, a drink, after-shave lotion, none of the above.
B.
It would be B.
It is a spice for burying people. And this is actually in the Gospel of John, is a good place to find that. It's the 19th verse, chapter, the 39th verse there, and it just talks about the fact that myrrh is used as a spice or a balm to embalm people or to bury people with that. And then you'll see, this is the picture I was talking about. This is gold, frankincense in the middle, and myrrh to your right. And if you go to Israel today, you can actually buy these items in little teeny tiny bottles with that. And I assume the gold is not real for $7.95 or whatever it is that you can get it, or $15 or whatever. But at least it's represented to that with that. And the gifts that were brought is kind of, people often say, what strange gifts to give a baby. With that, I don't know if you've been to a baby shower recently, but these are not the kinds of gifts that are usually given to a baby. But it was given to the family, and each of the gifts had a spiritual meaning as well as a practical one with that. So gold obviously represented the kingship of Jesus. Gold was very precious and was very valuable from the beginning of history almost to now, because of what it was able to represent and be, and with that, and it represented the virtue of the king or the leader with that. And then frankincense, we know, is a perfume. It's an incense. It's also made into an incense at times that you can burn with that. But it's also a symbol of deity. And so prayer would have been a gift that came with that. People would often light the frankincense as a way to create an atmosphere. And this has, of course, been held throughout tradition in churches around the world, mostly in Orthodox churches that we know now. The censer is used by the priest to create the aroma of the place for worship. And then myrrh is a symbol also of death. And what a strange gift to give a baby. But it also represented our mortality. And even for Jesus, his human life as we knew it. But it was used as an anointing oil for those who had died. So as they were prepared, and obviously representing suffering that takes place as we go through that. Then 20. How many wise men came to see Jesus? Write in the correct number.
Unknown.
Well, again, this was another trick one. The Bible doesn't mention a number of wise men nor shepherds. A lot of times for our pageantry, just for balance, we have 3 wise men and we have 3 shepherds. Because there were 3 gifts, we just have 3. And tradition is, in many cultures and around the world, is that each of the gifts was brought by an individual. And so you see the picture of the 3 wise men going across the desert. And because of the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh. We assume, again, based on history more so than what the Bible says, that there would have been an entourage of folks that would have been headed up by these wise men that were going across there. And that's in the 2nd chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, the 1st verse. It says, all it says is that wise men are coming from the east. With that. And then 21. What does wise men refer to? Men of educated class. They were Eastern kings. They were astrologers. They were smart enough to follow the star. They were sages. What were wise men? They were astrologers. And the word that's used in the scriptures is really for that. That's why we know they weren't kings in the traditional sense. They were learned people. They were educated, but they were also astrologers in that they followed with that. And that's in the 2nd chapter, the Gospel of Matthew, the 1st through the 2nd verses. Wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." Then the next one, 22. The wise men found Jesus in a manger, stable, house, Holiday Inn, good mood. It's in a house. The word that is used in the Greek in this particular thing is representative to a house. And one of the things that we don't know, again, for pageantry in the church, we tend to bring the shepherds and the wise men all at the same time, or we bring them, shepherds go first, wise men follow, and they come and they are at the manger, and then they either depart or whatever. We really don't know at what point in the story the wise men come. We don't know how long Mary and Joseph have actually been in Bethlehem at that point. Again, in our pageantry, we have it so that the wise men and the shepherds are there at the same time. We don't know what the story is on that. And so the wise men find their way. And it says in the second chapter of Matthew, the 11th verse, on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. We don't know how intentional the gospel writers were about the words they used in this instance, but house is the word that's used in the Greek for that statement. And also the little bit of the hint that we have too is that when Herod decides in Matthew that he is going to kill the firstborn child, he says, children, how old?
2.
3 years or less. If Jesus is still a little baby, is not knowing when he was born, maybe Herod's just taking a stab at it and trying to figure out, when it might be. Is there any purpose to 3 years and below? We don't know. And we just don't know how long it has been.
Does that mean maybe the wise men didn't find Jesus in Bethlehem? They found him.
No, they found it. Tradition is they found him in Bethlehem. It's just we don't know how long ago it was. Again, in our liturgical year, as we begin with Advent being the first season of the year, we move from that into Epiphany. And as I said earlier, for us in our liturgical year, there's 12 days of Christmas, from Christmas Day until January the 6th, which is Epiphany, which is the celebration of the coming of the wise men with that. And so we don't know.
Say anything about how long they stayed in Bethlehem after Jesus was born?
No, and it depends upon which gospel you read. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. We don't know with that other than what's specifically given to us. So that's where that is. And then we move to 23. The wise men stopped in Jerusalem to inform Herod about Jesus, to find out where Jesus was, to ask about the star they saw, for gas, to buy presents for Jesus. Which one? B. They stopped to find out from Herod where Jesus is. And so it says in the second chapter, the first and second verses of Matthew, the wise men came to Jerusalem asking, where is the child who is born King of the Jews? For we observed his star in the rising and have come to pay him homage. And they're asking that of Herod. And that's how Herod finds out, what about this child that is there? Then moving on to 24. Where do we find the Christmas story in order to check up on all these wonderful questions that we have? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all of the above, only A and C, A and B, A and C, A, B, and C with that. And if you've heard me talk about where they're from, you have the answer to that.
H.
Actually, it is, I did mention John, which is not listed there, but it's really G. It's A and C. Matthew and Luke are the two gospels that tell us the birth narrative. Mark doesn't have a birth narrative at all, and neither is John. And so for that reason, we have those two gospels that tell us what we need to know. Then 25th, when Joseph and Mary found out that Mary was pregnant with Jesus, what happened? They got married. Jesus wanted to break the engagement. Mary left town for 3 months. The angel told them to go to Bethlehem, A and B, or B and C.
C. D.
Is F. It's B and C. Joseph wanted to break the engagement, and Mary left town for 3 months. In Matthew 1:19, it says, her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to dismiss her quietly. And one of the stories that you remember, and some of the things, if you've seen any of the movies that often is acted out, is the reality that Mary is pregnant and she's betrothed to Joseph, and that was a stonable offense. Joseph had the right to have her stoned as an adulterer in that tradition. And so we have in the last part of this in Luke, the first chapter, the 39th and 56th verses, in those days, Mary set out and went with haste to a Judean town in the hill country, and that's to be obviously with Elizabeth, her aunt. And Mary remained with her about 3 months and then returned to her home, not top of her home, but to her home with that. And then 26, who told Mary and Joseph to go to Bethlehem? An angel, Mary's mother, Herod, Caesar, Augustus, Alexander the Great. No one told them. It's Caesar Augustus. Ken, you are indeed, brother, you're correct. And in those days, a decree went out from the Emperor Augustus that all the world would be registered. All went to their own homes to be registered. Joseph went to Nazareth in Galilee, as we've heard before, because he was the lineage of David. And then 27. Joseph took the baby Jesus to Egypt to show him the pyramids, to teach him the wisdom of the pharaohs, to put him in a basket in the reeds by the river, because he dreamed of it to be taxed. Joseph did not take Jesus to Egypt. It is D. He dreamed it, if you remember. In the second chapter of Matthew, the 13th verse. Now, after the wise men had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." With that. And then the next picture here is, and it's kind of hard to see, I think, maybe here in the room, but there's different routes, again, that they go down into Egypt. And it's really interesting. If you go to Egypt today, you can go to several places where they assume the Holy Family went. One of those is St. Catherine's, which is on the Sinai Peninsula. And in there, they actually will have it there. Then there's a Coptic church in Cairo, where they believe that, and it has some pretty credible information, that the Holy Family actually went there to Cairo. And so Jesus would have seen the pyramids if that was the case in that. And so they went there. So anyway, just to wrap it up, took a little longer than that than I wanted to, but it's just why look at this and why talk about it? Why bring it up to us? I think it helps us realize that there is a biblical story. There's actually two biblical stories that the church has tried to figure out how it all works together. And so historically and traditionally, the church has been one of the places that people learn about the history of the faith and the history of the church. And for that reason, we try to put together the liturgical year. You heard me talk about that. We begin with Advent. We go to Epiphany. We move from that to Ash Wednesday to Lent, Lent to Easter. Easter time goes into Pentecost. Pentecost goes into Kingdom Tide. Kingdom Tide goes into the Christ the King Sunday, which is the last Sunday in the Christian year. And then we begin it all again this coming week in Advent. And it's to help us to understand and to learn and to know. And the church had the challenge of different writings from different gospel readers. One was in Luke, we got Caesar Augustus declaring everybody has to go to be registered for the purpose of him having more money and taxes. Mary and Joseph travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem. There's nowhere for them to stay, so they end up in a side room, or what we would call a barn or a stable. Jesus is born and is laid in a manger, something very unprince-like, unkingly. Angels appear to the shepherds in the field, singing and telling them where to go. The shepherds visit the Christ child. The shepherds return praising God and telling everyone the first evangelists are the shepherds. You have the shepherds representing the lowest of the lows in culture. Shepherds were even below thieves in the culture. So they were the lowest of lows. And then you follow that story with another story, and that is in Matthew. You exit the shepherds, and then you bring in the wise men. A learned, a kingly presence is there. They exit, they go to the king's palace. They had to be people of high learned and high to be able to actually get in to see Herod. They had to be highly thought of. So you have the low of the lows and the high of the highs, each coming seeking Jesus Christ in their lives. And then you exit the angels singing and enter Herod calling for the extermination of baby boys. So the church wrestles with what do you do with this information? And so for that reason, the church has worked over a period of time and tried to put the story together that people would learn what it means to everyone be welcome at the cradle, everyone to be welcomed to the stable, everyone welcome to be a part of the nativity with that. And so anyway, there's a lot of side stories that go on to this. But my hope is that you begin to look at the scriptures in a new and different way. And you begin to see how simplistic the story is, but yet how magnificent it is in ways and we have embellished it with hymns, and we have embellished it with stories and traditions. We have brought in secular as well as religious, and in our history and tradition as a culture, we have celebrated the coming of the Christ child. So as we begin this season, my hope is that in our pageantry, we will appreciate the fact that the story is complete. The story is whole by taking pieces and parts of the historical biblical story and be able to put it together in a way that tells us and helps us know and remember that Jesus Christ is Lord of Lords and King of Kings and comes as a gift to all of us during this season. So, Brian, you want to follow us up and close us out?